So we should start recording.
Yes, please start recording. We're going to call the February 17th, 2021 meeting to order. That humor before we started was that we are going to try and remind members of the public that we want to keep to a 2 to 3 minute timeline during public testimony. And if they have written comments, they can supply them to us, maybe briefly summarize them and then give them to us in written form. So why don't we do a roll call first?
Okay, Sharon.
Here.
David Anderson.
Here.
Bill. Thought I saw him on here. Bill. Okay, raising his hand.
Here.
Janet.
Here.
Kyle.
I am here.
Thank you. David Dellendorf.
Present.
Paul.
Here.
Jane.
Fuller's here.
Sorry, here, I'm here.
Jane, thank you. Patty.
Here.
Tony.
Present.
Richard.
Here.
Liz. Robert. Bob. Kevin. Olivia. Maureen.
Here.
Anne Marie.
Here.
Here comes Liz. And Tom.
Here.
So Liz has joined us. Are we missing Bob? Is that who we're missing? And no one else?
By my count, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving on to the minutes from the February 10th meeting. Any comments, suggestions, changes, concerns with the minutes? I would accept an motion to adopt the minutes.
Motion to adopt the minutes.
Second.
And seconded by Olivia. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, minutes are adopted. Okay, Mylene. You want to turn on your camera if you can?
There you are.
Yay. So Mylene has been our county auditor for some time now. Is it 2.5 terms now you're in?
3.5.
Wow, 3.5 terms. And I've asked Mylene to give us a presentation. Each of the independently elected officials and the council members we hope to have present to the full commission on their position. But for the purposes of this conversation, we wanted to have overview of the budget and how it works, what different agencies there are, and so on. And so this will not get into the scope of work of those different departments and so on. That will be something that the county manager will present to us at the next meeting. But this will be an opportunity for Mylene to go into detail of the budget process, how it comes together, and what the budget is, and so on. So I thought this would be really informative for us before we dive into a lot of the decisions we're going to be making. So Mylene, thank you for being here today. And also, I believe you've sat in on most, if not all of our meetings so far. So thank you for just participating in the process.
I missed 1 week. I actually gave myself a week off, and including that, it was amazing. Not even any email.
I thought you were saying that our meetings were amazing.
No, missing one was amazing, Kevin. And last week I had to leave a little early because I had a little social thing at 6 o'clock, which may or may not have involved wine. So it couldn't be late to it. Anyway, when I asked Kevin, so what exactly do you want to hear? Do you want to know what the budget is, or do you want to know how do we get to the budget? And he said, it's the process that you want to hear. I'm ad-libbing all of this, by the way. The presentation which I sent you, on which I'm going to go through, is based on a Budget 101 training I did a few years ago when we had quite a few new managers in the county. So I put together something to walk them through the process. And when Kevin told me what he wanted, I thought this would probably work just great. Of course, I went through it and made a lot of changes. focusing on the charter review process and you guys. I think it would be easiest if people have questions to ask them as we go. I think saving to the questions at the end, it just gets more confusing, having to find the right slide and all. If I feel like there are too many questions, I'll just shut down the questions for a while, make sure we'll finish within the time allowed. Does that sound good to you, Kevin?
Absolutely. And I am keenly aware of your ability to shut people up. So
You may have some experience in that regard, don't you, Kevin?
just a little.
Okay, let me remember how to share my, there it is, share screen. Okay.
Well, I've got it up.
I did send out late this afternoon a copy of what I am going to present in case you don't have video or you just like to take notes. And you may have not even gotten it. If you didn't get it before, you'll find it in your mail now. There, is that shared?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so Salmon County Budget 101, here we are. Let's go. This is what we're going to cover. There is stuff here that is so detailed, you will not care at all. And if I start to talk about it and half of you fall asleep, don't be shy and say, I think we can do without that part. And sometimes I'll say, but this is why it's important. And other times I'll say, good, let's skip it. Why is my page down not working? Okay. Oh, I know why, because I'm trying to work from the screen instead of from where I am. Okay, let me go back to here. There we go. All right. Okay, so these are the primary players in the budget process. The county auditor, department heads, budget team, county manager, and the county council. And I will talk about each of these and their rules and their roles and the
Sound went off. Your sound went off.
You're muted.
You went away.
There you go.
I think I hit the A key accidentally. I tend to do that.
I think
Okay.
so.
Thank you. So these are the people, I'll tell you what their roles are and the authority for those roles. And again, I'm back on that. No. There we go. Okay. All right. So, oh, and I stuck this in the last minute. It's not in what I sent you this afternoon. It suddenly occurred to me, I should mention this. There was a charter amendment in November of 2019, you know, back before the world fell apart. And it passed by 81%. It was an amendment to allow the county to do biennial budgeting. I think the passage percentage tells you a lot about how this is really a good thing, besides which it's optional. The wording, the way we wrote it, allows biennial budgeting, but does not require it. We first used it for the 2021 biennium, and everybody has said, wow, weird time or bad time or whatever time to start biennial budgeting. And that's what we all thought, because we knew there'd be lots of budget changes. But on the other hand, there was so much to do last year. Because of the biennial budget, we did not have to go through a full budget process in 2020 for 2021. It was a lifesaver. My first biennium, I'm a big fan. I think it did everything it was supposed to do, and then some. So I'm not going to talk a lot about biennial budgeting, but as we go along, if you have questions about it, let me know. So the process, back to the process. The auditor creates worksheets for the department heads to use, or extract those out of our financial system, which is called Eden. If you see references to Eden here, it is not Paradise. It is, in fact, the financial system. The auditor also issues the budget call, and you'll see footnotes that tell you the references to RCW, our county charter, occasionally something else, for these authorities, responsibilities, and sometimes for the dates, which are sometimes different from each other. For example, the preliminary budget, first Tuesday. Yes, the when things are due, maybe have one rule in statute and another in charter, but charter trumps. But I've given you all that information here. So I issue the budget call, get the department budget co-author by the charter, the budget message, co-authoring with the county council. I'll talk more about that later on, and produce a budget book, which is not a statutory thing, but is a good communications tool. The department heads take the worksheets that I give to them, but by the way, I didn't even know this till I was working on this. It says in statute that I'm supposed to give them forms. I do. What do you know? And they get those back to me by the second Monday in August. Actually, I asked for it a little earlier than that, more typically the first Monday in August. And then the budget team. Now, this is the part which is non-statutory, but I know, having done this for many years now for the county and talked to many, many other county auditors, that the concept of a budget team is quite common, if not universal in other counties. That is, it's easy to say the auditor puts together, but in fact, it takes a group of people talking together and exchanging ideas to put together a document as complex as the budget. And in this county, the budget team, we call them, is the auditor, the chief deputy auditor, the county manager, and one other department head, currently the HCS director, who is also the deputy county manager. We meet with each of the departments after they turn in their budget, go over it, make sure we understand it, review their recommendations, hear their reasonings. And then this group makes recommendations about what goes into the preliminary budget. So it's not a single person or department working on that.
And Mylene, there's a question from Jane. I believe HCS is the Health and Community Services Director. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then
Government is all about acronyms. So sorry about that. I try to explain them.
And
Yes.
then just a clarification, which is clear, but I just want to point out, so you're the only elected official on the budget team.
That is correct.
Okay, and so later on in your presentation, you'll touch upon where the county council touches on this?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Because obviously, obviously they are the most important player because they get to adopt the budget.
Having been one, I don't know if they're the most important, but go ahead.
Well, they're the final player. How about that? Okay, so the county manager, meanwhile, while all this budget stuff is other budget stuff is going on, he's working with the assessor to prepare the levy ordinances, a key part of the budget process, and is also, this language is from charter, is the council's representative in the budget process. So you know that he talks, of course, to the council members individually, as he must, so that he's always keeping them apprised and they can give feedback to him. And so that is one way that the council remains involved in the process, is through the county manager. Then the county council comes in once the preliminary budget is sent to the council middle of October by the auditor. The budget from that point on is the council's. By the way, they co-author the budget message is the language in the charter. Writing by committee, anybody who's done it knows that does not work. Typically what has happened, since the county manager is the council's representative in the budget process, he and I talk about what we want the message to be. I think any two people are going to split this duty depending on skills, but I'm a pretty good writer, so I write it. He reviews it, we talk about the final version. So it is a joint effort. And that budget message is published in the budget book, which is presented with the preliminary budget to council middle of October.
And Mylene, we have a question from David Dellendorf.
Okay, I'm glad you're watching the hands because I can't see them.
Could you just list quickly the names of the departments?
Well, there's a lot of departments, but I can if you want to.
Well, how many are there? If it's 10 or 20, no, but how many are there?
It is more than 10 and less than 20.
Okay. I
But I can
haven't,
do that. It would be fairly quick.
okay,
Because I know
go.
the order. Well, first I'll start with the elected departments, and even though some people distinguish between the department heads and elected officials, I don't. The elected officials are also department heads. So when I say department heads, I include the elected officials. So there's the auditor, the assessor, and the treasurer. There's the finance departments. There's the clerk, county clerk, who's essentially the clerk to the Superior Court, and the district court. The clerk there is not a department head because it's strangely constructed, but district court, Superior Court, and county clerk are three different departments. Also in the law and justice area, you've got the prosecutor and the sheriff. And I think that's got everybody in the courthouse. You've got county administration, which is the county manager's department. It has some subheads that are important, like IT and HR, but it's one department. Elections, by the way, is a department, but reports to the auditor. Then you've got health and community services, the HCS, which includes affordable housing and mental health. You've got community development, used to be community development and planning. Roads, ER&R was separated from roads and now reports to administration.
And Mylene, sorry, ER&R.
ER&R is equipment rental and revolving. It is the fleet services.
Yep.
They manage the fleet for the county.
Is Public Works not a department itself under that name?
Yeah, it is, but it's one of those weird departments that it has changed a lot. I think of it as roads and natural resources grants separately, but they're technically, I guess, in one department under the county engineer. And he has a deputy department head who is the, what is her title? Environmental Resources Manager.
And Mylene, we'll let you get back to your slideshow. There's one other question. I also want to remind commissioners that next week we're going to have the county manager presenting, and he can go through in great detail each of the departments and their roles. But there is a question from Kyle regarding the deputy county manager and how that position is assigned or designated.
That's a new thing.
It's not, the position is vacant still, right?
It is not a written description. Well, maybe it is. Maybe they wrote it into a description. It came as a surprise to me. It happened sometime last year. And it was given to Mark. Mark
Okay.
is a good guy. And if I was asked who should have that role, I would have said Mark Tompkins.
Thank you. And Kyle, let's circle back on that question next week when the county manager is presenting to us.
Okay, so council gets the preliminary budget, holds hearings, and adopts the budget. And later, and we'll talk about this separately, adopts amendments to the budget. Another sidebar that occurred to me when I was writing this, most counties adopt budgets by resolution, and that is the way the RCW 3640-080 is written for county budgets. And I think San Juan County did it that way. Do you remember, Paul, prior to the charter?
It,
But
it was
since-
by, it was by resolution, yes.
Okay, which is the way most counties do it. And the county charter now, it specifies ordinance. I don't know why that decision was made. It's been that way, obviously, the whole time I've been here. And this is not a recommendation.
Did it again.
Mylene, you're muted again. Are you there?
Looks like her microphone is going. It's not muted.
Yeah, you're not muted on Zoom, Mylene. Now you're muted. Now you're not.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, I got to keep my hands away from my keyboard. You know, we learned to keep our hands away from our face, but now I have to put them somewhere else. So they've been on my keyboard. Sorry about that. It's not, like I said, it's not a recommendation. It's just a thought I had when I was going through this. Would we be better served by going back to adoption by resolution? And now I'm going back to. Okay. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Here's an approximate timeline. We haven't put together the budget calendar for this year, but based on previous years, these are the approximate dates. The budget call will go out the second Monday in July, about 3 weeks later. I have this theory, if you give departments too much time, they just put it off forever. The budgets are due back. Over the next 3 weeks, the budget team will meet with each of the departments to go over their budgets. Budget book submissions will be due about the 23rd, middle of October. Now that big gap in between that's when we're actually physically putting together the budget and the budget book. When the preliminary budget goes to council, the next 3 meeting times, there are department presentations to council, public hearing in November, and then typically that will spread in, will follow over one more meeting into December for the adoption. Now, this is where we're gonna start getting into some of the nitty gritty. Basis of accounting. San Juan County is a cash basis entity, which means that expenditures are recognized when paid and revenues when received, not when earned, as in a GAAP, GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, or accrual-based entity. We don't maintain a balance sheet except for very rudimentary. The importance of this to budgeting. A budget is a projection of sources and uses. You're saying this is how much we're going to have in the way of sources or revenue, this and uses or revenue. Beginning cash is budgeted in a cash basis entity as a revenue. It's a source of revenue. Ending cash is a use. So that can be very confusing to people, especially when they see, for example, a $3 million budget in the lodging tax fund, and we spend only 1.5 million. Those are rough numbers, but they are roughly accurate. So and that's true of a lot of funds. The first line in the budget is always beginning cash, the revenues. First line in expenditures is always ending cash. And if you take those numbers out, then you're just looking at appropriations and what I call true revenues. Revenues and expenditures have to balance. Now that's why we include cash, beginning cash and ending cash. Look at it as a simple mathematical equation. You take beginning cash, you add revenues. That's all your sources. You take away the expenditures and you are left with ending cash. So beginning cash plus revenue equals ending cash plus expenditures.
Mylene, we have a question from Bob.
Okay.
Go ahead, Bob. I'll just read what he wrote. He wrote, so where does the county report obligations such as debt and carry over?
Okay. When I say that we maintain a rudimentary balance sheet, those are on it. Where the question specifically was where do we report them? They are reported in our annual report to the state auditor in Schedule 9, Schedule of Liabilities.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So revenue.
Kevin, that wasn't my question. My question.
Oh, sorry, that was from Bill Apple. So Bob, please go ahead. You had a question.
Yes. She had mentioned earlier about adoption of the budget by resolution rather than ordinance, and that is presently by ordinance, used to be by resolution. I was wondering what her opinion was about continuing that, or whether it ought to be changed, whether it would be better for her and for the county if it were changed back to by resolution.
I haven't done enough research to make a recommendation on that. When I said I was mentioning this, I was not recommending it. I truly mean that. If it's something you wish to pursue, I'll do some research. I want to get, you will want to get the prosecutor's input on that. I don't want public access to be lost, but public
Yes.
access is required even
Well,
for
my-
the rest of the process. So I don't know yet. I think it would be more
Okay,
advantageous
thank you.
for the amendment process than for the adoption process. Let's put it that way. Okay, revenues and expenditures have to balance for every fund. Revenues equal expenditures, and that's only because we use cash to make them balance. Limitations on expenditures. This is worth noting that county officials elected and appointed are obligated to spend within their budgets. And theoretically, excess expenditures are the personal obligation of the county official. Expenditures, this is almost another, well, it's not this, it's in the same citation, but it's not the same thing. Expenditures cannot legally exceed appropriations. And if you look at our budgets in our annual reports, we never, expenditures never exceed budget because they legally can. And we have systems in place to keep that from happening. It did happen one year. Tiny anecdote. It was a land bank. We had gotten a new bond. It was a refunding of an old bond. Refunding means paying it off and then getting the money and paying it back. It's kind of complicated. And we failed to account for the getting the money and then paying it back, kind of a double transaction. So we did exceed budget that year. The land bank did by $6 million, just a little bit. We disclosed it in the annual report. It was no big deal. But other than that, I cannot think of a time when we have had a fund exceed appropriations. If we're gonna do it, we're gonna go,
We have a question from Olivia.
okay?
I remember reviewing the county budget at a presentation a couple of years ago. Currently, to kind of piggyback off of Phil's question, for the county debt that carries over, is that just kind of a running balance, or are they borrowing from a different fund? Are they borrowing from a bank? As a banker, I got to ask. It's just I'm wanting to get some clarification on that portion of the budget.
We don't carry huge amounts of debt like the federal government. What we have are specific bonds and a few loans that would be considered more loans than bonds, but they are listed in our Schedule 9 annually as individual line items. And for each one, we show beginning balance, payments made, if anything was added to them, which typically doesn't happen unless it's a new debt, and then the ending balance. So we carry them forward only in the sense that the amount not paid is still owed. Does that help, Olivia?
Yes. Second question is currently with the 2021 budget, is the county running at a deficit where there's going to be a debt that's going to be carried over again? And if so, kind of where's the county at? Because as the commission discusses different changes, some of the suggestions that they're making could have financial implications to the county budget. So just kind of a temperature check, what does it look like for 2021 and the possibility of how, far is the county going to be in debt?
Olivia, can we table that question till a little bit later?
Sure,
It's a
no
good
problem.
question, and I will address it specifically.
Great, thank you.
But
Yeah.
don't let me forget it. When we get to the screens full of numbers, that's when you want to raise it again.
And Mylene, I've got a question from Tony, and then one, I think I saw Paul Dossett's hand up as well.
Okay,
Tony, go ahead with what you put in chat.
Hey, Mylene, thank you for being here.
welcome.
If the revenues exceed or lag the budgeted amounts, do you have to come to the council and amend the budget either way?
No.
Okay, so what happens with the funds if they exceed the budget? What do you do with those kind of funds?
If you
Or
may,
lag-
if more revenue comes in, then you'll have more ending cash than budgeted. If less revenue comes in, if it's dramatic, as in 08, as in 20, we will reduce the budget to get closer to what we expect revenues to be.
So if the revenue is larger than what the budget is, may the departments come back to the council and say would like more funds, or does that? Or does that
Yes,
not happen very often?
and I think unless there are more questions, oh, Paul, you had one, because that is the next thing I'm going to talk about.
All right, thank you.
Paul, you had a question?
Well, back in the day, your predecessor, Si Stevens, used to call it a rainy day fund. Do you still have that?
Si never had a rainy day fund. Si had his drawers. You remember his drawers, don't you?
Imagine the
Yeah.
magic desk.
Oh, yeah, I remember the drawers.
And what he did was he was capitalizing on this accounting gap between, it's basically the difference between accrual and cash accounting. It's a little bit of trickery, and that's where he got his extra money. Now we have a real rainy day fund, and I will talk about that in a bit.
Okay, thank you.
We've
You're
got
welcome.
one more question from David Dellendorf, and then we'll let
Okay, then we should move on. David? If he's
Okay, why
writing in chat, I'm not reading chat.
Mylene, why don't you go ahead? And what I will say is if folks have a question, message me in chat. Just tell me you have a question and then I'll get you in the line. Since I can't see everybody's hands, I don't want to miss everybody. So
Okay,
Mylene,
I am unmuted. Can I just ask a
Oh.
quick question?
go ahead.
Are there any limitations on increases in expenditures annually, similar to what the state imposes on increases in real estate taxes for certain purposes?
No, not on spending, not that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
Okay, so this speaks to, who asked the question? Tony or Paul? About what happens if the revenue goes up?
I did.
And I said that expenditures cannot legally exceed appropriations. So you appropriate, let's say $100,000 and you've got 100,000 and you've got 10,000 in ending cash. So your total budget is 100. Now I'm confusing myself with numbers. $110,000 is your budget, of which 100 is appropriations. That's the part that they said you could spend. The cash is not something you can spend. So if revenue goes up, and this is a real life problem that happens almost every year. Some department will have some windfall in revenue and they think they can spend it. And they can't. Just because revenue goes up does not mean you can spend it. If, however, you have a reason to spend it, and particularly if that revenue is generating a reason to spend it, you can go to council and ask for a budget amendment. And we'll talk about budget amendments a little bit later. So again, budgeting ending cash is not an appropriation. You can't spend it. You can't spend more than was appropriated unless you get a budget amendment.
And why don't we let Mylene try and get through some more of these slides too. So put your messages, just let me know if you have questions.
I'll tell you when I get to the boring part, and then we can stop doing the presentation and just answer questions. Okay, I know some of you are thinking this is already boring. Okay, county adopts budgets at the fund level. The significance of that is the level at which the state auditor will look to us to see if we finished within budget. We're going to talk about funds more for those of you who are saying, what's a fund? Not the department level, and God, not the line item level. There is one county I know of that budgets at the line item level. That means if they budget $500 for travel and they spend $550, well, they can't spend $550, they can only spend $500. And that's just a ridiculous amount of detail and causes people to amend the budget constantly. From a financial reporting point of view, so when I report to the state auditors, expenditures have to be within the budget at the fund level. That's what adopting at the fund level means. Departments within that fund can exceed budget. But from a compliance point of view, and remember I said earlier, excess expenditures are the personal obligation of the county official. So that's it's not an inconsistency. One is a practice put in place by the state auditor, whose authority it is to audit, to create systems for the counties financially, and the other is a legal obligation. BARS codes, okay, now we're getting close to the boring part. BARS codes are the chart of accounts, but BARS stands for Budgeting, Accounting, and Reporting System. The state auditor, by statute, is assigned the responsibility of creating this system, and all counties and cities and other jurisdictions have to use it. If any of you really want to know more about BARS codes, you can go to this link that I've provided, and there's about a 50-minute introduction to BARS codes. The most important part is the chart of accounts section, if you really want to do that to yourself. Formats vary from county to county, entity to entity. This is how ours is structured. You don't need to remember those names. Okay, fund accounting. This is important because this talks about budget and how we budget. Fund accounting, which is a kind of accounting used by governments and by nonprofits, segregates money into funds based on their source or on their use or on both. Many government funds in particular are restricted. I'm sure you all know that lodging taxes can only be used to promote tourism. Land bank taxes can only be used to purchase and maintain conservation areas. Roads taxes and grants and all kinds of other revenue that they get can only be used on roads. So those are restricted funds. By separating the money into different funds, each of which is accounted for separately, we enhance traceability and transparency to the public. So I could produce a report that says this is all the money that came into the roads fund and where it came from, and this is how it was spent, without having to muddle through and separate out what went to parks and what went to the current expense fund. Related to that, from statute, one fund cannot benefit at the expense of another. That is and that is not a direct quote, I do not believe. I'll have to look at that. I think I put that in quotes because it's something that is said a lot in government. But that is the source of that. And what it means is just what we said. You cannot use roads funds. You can't, this is a popular one, you can't take land bank money and give it to affordable housing. That's, the other way you can move money from one fund to another is to attribute it to a proper account and a permitted expense. So one of the ways this comes into play is if one fund makes a loan to another, which happens sometimes, we could do that, but there's a limit of 3 years on such a loan, or it begins to look like a gift, and that would be not permitted under this rule. When we look at the structure of the budget itself, funds are, if you will, the highest level, because that's the level at which we adopt the budget, the level at which the budget's success and compliance will be measured. Many of our funds have departments underneath them, and most departments have some kind of division into programs. We adopted the fund level, as I've already said, and these are the different types of funds, which may be defined by the source of their funds or by the use of the funds. I'll talk more about these as I show you in more detail for the county. General funds have mostly unrestricted revenue. And if at least 20% of any fund's revenue comes from the current expense fund, comes from the general fund, it is a general fund. So current expense is our largest and primary general fund because it's unrestricted. It's the fund that people can argue about and try to get some of. It's the one we spend the most time on and talk about most during the budget process. The
My-
grants fund
Oh, go ahead.
is a management fund of the current expense fund. So they're rolled up for reporting purposes, but for ease of tracking the grants, we've moved them into a separate fund called the grants fund. So it's also a general fund. And then the budget stabilization fund and the insurance cumulative reserve fund are both general funds because their funding comes from current expense primarily. I'll take a minute to talk about the budget stabilization fund because Paul asked about the rainy day fund.
And Mylene, just before you jump into that, Kyle Davies asked a question regarding if the Charter Review Commission were to create a new position or a new department, do we also need to specify the specific or likely fund sourcing? And I believe the answer to that is no, but we would be wise to talk to you about potential, right?
I think you should talk about it, but no, I think that the charter needs to stick to principles and not get too much into details because you could tie it down in ways that might be unproductive. But yeah, if that comes up, let's talk about it. Budget Stabilization Fund. It was created in 2009 when the county adopted its first reserves policy. And that was, most of you will remember, was the height of the last recession. We were really, really low on funds at that point. The general fund, the current expense fund, at 1 month, I remember it clearly, it was September, got down to $50,000 in cash in the fund. That's as if you had a nickel in your bank account, or maybe less, depending on what you keep in your bank account. But it was creepy. It was biting our fingernails till we got to the next month. With the support of council, the full support of council, we worked to create this new fund called a Budget Stabilization Fund. Colloquially, that's our rainy day fund. And every year since then, like I said, I think maybe 2010, they didn't because revenue is still going down at that point. There's a formula for how much has to be contributed every year. It's been maintained every year. Some years they've put a lot more than was required to be put in. We got up to to over $2 million, I think. And then last year, for the first time, we used it. That is why we created the fund. It was raining last year and we used some of that fund.
Mylene, do we have a cap on our county budget stabilization fund similar to the state?
Yes, I think it's 15% of the current expense budget, and we're not close to it yet. And now we're a little further than we used to be. But yeah, there's a cap. The insurance cumulative reserve fund is just money we reserve for insurance claims. Our risk pool requires that we have one. Okay, special revenue funds are funds where the revenue is restricted. That's why it's special revenue. And these are a lot of our most popular funds: parks, roads, noxious weeds. I don't know how popular that is, but it's a good service. And lodging tax. Not much else to say. We have one debt service fund, bond redemption, capital funds, capital improvement, obviously, but now we've reclassified the two stormwater funds into capital funds because the state auditor said that's what they are. Enterprise funds. We have only one: solid waste. Enterprise funds provide services for a fee primarily to external customers, and internal service funds do the same thing for internal customers. ER&R, that's our fleet service, provides vehicle management services to the other departments, and IT provides IS and GIS services to other departments. Those are our two internal service funds. A little bit more about types of spending. The budget includes three broad types of expenditures, which we can break out easily by bars code using reports. So payroll is one of them. That would be wages and all benefits. Maintenance and operations, which is basically everything that's not payroll and not capital. And capital can be both equipment, either equipment or bricks and mortar, land, real estate. There are some restrictions to make sure that budgeted funds are used the way they are intended to be used. The firmest is on capital, because if you budget $50,000 to build a new widget to help in your department's tasks, and then you end up not deciding not to do it, you are not allowed to spend that $50,000 on anything else. It can only be spent on what it was budgeted for. We used to also have a more informal policy that no more than 5% of a budget could be moved between payroll and M&O. So meaning, okay, you want to hire another person, we're going to take some M&O money and do that. Or you had a vacancy for a while and you want to take that money and spend it on M&O. We don't really go by.
Oh, you did it again.
Mylene, you touched your keyboard again.
No, I didn't really. I didn't touch it this time. I just
Well,
got this message that said the host has muted you.
Oh,
Uh-oh, hey, Kevin.
All right, Kevin.
Catherine is having some computer issues, so that might be part of it. My apologies, Mylene.
Oh, not a problem.
Mylene, while you're paused, there's a question that's come from David Dellendorf that says, if the
Okay.
and part of this, I think, would be later when we have Randy present to us a question for Randy as well. But it says if a charter amendment is passed, so if we create a new department and that's passed by the voters, how does that get implemented by the council and put into the budget?
Well, it would depend on what this department was doing. For example, if it was a new department to better provide mental health services, that's a crazy idea, but I say that because I would make the recommendation that we put that department in the mental health tax fund. We've got funding for it. If it is for animal control, okay, I would say, okay, there's a possibility we could divert some of our dog license funds to that purpose. Alternatively, we could put it in current expense and have the sheriff run it. So, I mean, I think there would need to be a discussion about the nature of the job being created and how it might be funded.
So back to the previous question, we as a Charter Review Commission do not need to get into those weeds, but it would be wise for us to have a conversation with you if we start heading down a path thinking about a department or an elected or something.
Yeah, because you'd want to be able to answer the questions from people who ask you, how are we going to pay for that, Kevin?
I've got a magic desk like Cy.
Yeah, he took his desk with him, unfortunately.
His desk is on the Colorado River. Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, so now we budget bodies, we budget FTE, full-time equivalents. So we budget how many employees you have, which prevents this need to keep people from moving money between payroll and M&O. So those are just ways that we help to manage spending through the structure. Okay, sidebar. Okay, this is I'm gonna say this COP 2, this is my opinion, but it is, and it's kind of a silly question, which funds matter the most, but I'm thinking in terms of the budget and which funds we spend the most time on and which get the most animated discussions. And so from a budget concept, these are ones that matter. Current expense, I already said, this is the fund with the most unrestricted revenues. It houses the key functions of government, except for roads, the most commonly thought of functions of government. Law and justice, administration, and finance are all in current expense. And because it's got unrestricted funds, it's the one, if people want something new, they want to go to current expense and get it. So that one is the big one that dominates the conversation during budget conversation. The grants fund, again, an extension of current expense, and it's all grant money, and it represents funding for a lot of, the hot topics of the day: environment, health, emergency management, victims of crime. So it is a very important, I would say, fund to the county. Grant funding, by the way, is countywide the second largest source of revenue for the county. County roads. which is the second largest fund after current expense, it still represents for many people the for some people, the only legitimate purpose of county government. It's certainly the most visible service. And, you know, when you ask somebody, what's a county do for you? Unless they live on one of the remote islands, they say roads. And if they live on one of the remote islands, they say they don't even maintain our roads. Land bank. So the land bank, if you put those two funds together, because it has two funds, the Conservation Area Fund and the Land Bank Stewardship and Management Fund, if you put them together, they would be the second largest fund. Separately, they're the third and fourth largest fund. So this is a lot of money. And that's good because this is money that's being squirreled away using the land bank revenues so that if the levy ever goes away, we will have the funds to manage these properties for a very long time, hopefully forever. Everybody knows though, the land bank is a political lightning rod. And the fund and is itself literally unique to San Juan County. This is the only county in the state that has adopted that provision in state law.
One of only 3 in the country. Mylene, we have 2 questions, and I want to point out that we had hoped to finish your presentation by 5, which would be in 5 minutes. So we'll plan on going a few minutes over. But one question is regarding grant funds. Where do most of the grant funds come from? Is it from the state, feds, private entities? And then the second question is, if the county were to lease some of its public lands, where would that income go to?
What was the first
Public
question?
lands, I'm talking about like if they aren't using some of the public works facilities or they're not using some of their buildings because people are teleworking?
The money would go to the building, the fund that owns the building. So for example, if they started leasing the Spring Street building, which is owned by the Roads Fund, the rent would go to the Roads Fund.
Okay.
If they lease land bank building for a private horse operation, that money would go to the land bank and Lincoln would lose his job. So what was the first question?
The first question was, where do our grants come from?
I've done the math on this. I think it's about 2/3 federal and 1/3 state.
Okay. Okay. Please go ahead.
All right, let me get to what's important. Just mentioned affordable housing, also unique to San Juan County. And this is the one that I think will have the most direct effect on what San Juan County looks at in the future. Parks and Fair, immensely popular, mental health, lots of money, but they've had a hard time delivering the services. Budget stabilization, we already talked about. And my personal favorite, the Veterans Assistance Fund, which I work with very closely to ensure those services are available to our veterans. Let's skip the stuff about worksheets. You can read this and send me questions. I'd be happy to come next week and answer questions. Cost allocation is totally boring. Boy, yeah, it depends on how much you want to hear this. We can talk more next week if you want to. So the official story of the budget goes into the budget book. And this budget book is available online. The link is at the bottom of this page, and that is the picture of the cover there on the right. This is a book that is used by the council. It's used by finance departments when we get finance companies, when we go out for a bond, press, unions. It's where departments get to write their own sections and tell their story about what they do. The auditor staff provides data and graphs to back up those numbers. Amending, this is important. Okay, the council can amend the budget at any time in the year, but not after the year. That used to be things people tried to do, and the state auditors slammed their foot down and say you can't do that. There are 2 types of budget amendments: emergency and supplemental. Basically, supplemental is grants. Emergency is things which could not reasonably have been foreseen. Or they just saw some shiny new object and wanted it. There's no limit to the number of times a budget can be amended during a year. I know one county that amends literally weekly. San Juan County, we don't have a fixed schedule for amendments. But we typically do the first one, adopt the first one in April or May. And in addition to emergency and supplemental requests, that first amendment, we always also adjust budgeted beginning cash to actual beginning cash. Let me say that again, because we budget cash, we can't know for certain how much beginning cash we have until after the end of the year. So in our first budget amendment, we amend our budgeted beginning cash to actual, now that we know what the previous year's ending cash was. We do a second typically around August or September, and a third if required, and it's always my great goal to avoid this, but it rarely happens, in November or December. The process is just an abbreviated version of the full budget process. That's why I said, maybe we keep ordinances for the budget adoption, but go the resolutions for the amendment. I call for requests, departments submit them, we put them together. Council looks at that and they seek additional information from the departments. There are notice requirements. And the 2021 budget, in fact, okay, that link at the bottom is to the ordinance which revised the 2021 budget for emergency and supplemental appropriations. Now, the thing I'm pointing out here is that because we had already adopted a 2021 biennium budget, right? So we amended the 2021 budget. We didn't have to adopt a 2021 budget from scratch. We merely amended it, which is why it was a much easier process. So there's a sample of what a budget amendment ordinance would look like. These are the numbers that I said. I told somebody, was it Olivia, to stop me and go back to the question of, what was that question?
Yeah, so I remember reviewing the budget a couple years ago, and something that was pointed out was that the county is carrying over debt each year. So where's the current standing for the county?
Okay, let's just look at the 2021 column to make it, okay? So the right two columns, they're both in light pink for the numbers, and the top says 2021 revenue and expenditures. The budget calls for $3.5 million in beginning cash. This is just the current expense fund, our main general fund. The general department, it's called total general, which is the department in which beginning cash is budgeted. The budget for that department is 1.748 in revenue. And if you do the math, that means that this budget is assuming that we will consume $1.779 million in cash. We will reduce our cash by $1.8 million during the year. I'm going to refer you to the previous column now, the 2020 column. There, the assumption by the time we got to the ending and the adjustments we've made, that we're assuming we consume only 411. I'm 95% confident at this time, because we're still waiting on some grant figures to come in, that in fact, our beginning cash will be high enough, will be higher than last year, and we will not have consumed any cash. And that is what happens in most years. Let me remind you that we cannot exceed budget. We cannot spend more than budget, right? So as long as your revenues that actually come in equal or exceed budget, your expenditures are going to come in less, and your cash will always go up. The only reason it would not is if your revenue estimates were off. In this past decade, well, since the recession, we have been in a period of rapidly growing sales tax, which has driven the growth of the current expense fund. So every year we budget a deficit, and every year it ends up that we have increased cash. I think last year we actually went down a little bit, but prior to that we have been increasing cash. So there's a lot of factors you have to look at. And sometimes because of the way that we budget as a cash basis entity, it looks like we're going to spend at a deficit, but we won't, because we know we're not going to spend all the money because we can't legally. The other thing I'm going to point out is these percents, the 12.95 and 8.21%. That refers to the percent of the total current expense budget represented by ending cash. In this case, can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so this 2.7 million over the total 20 or so $million budget is 12.95%. So at the end of the budget, we our projected ending cash was 13% of budget. Our reserve policy that was adopted in 2009 and amended once, maybe twice since then, requires that we adopt a budget with at least 10%. This number equal to at least 10%, and that amendments that we make during the year reduce it to not less than 8%. This 2021 budget, this it's not reduced less than 8%. In fact, this actually looks better than when we adopted, but that's definitely lower than we'd like to see it. But it was between last year and our uncertainty about this year, that was where the best we could do.
When does the 2020 budget get approved?
The 2020 budget was adopted in December of 2019, and the 2021 budget was adopted at the same time because it's a biennial budget. The 2021 amendment took place in December of 2020.
And Mylene, how many slides do you have left?
I can stop anytime. That there's a bunch of numbers. I was going to point out some things about it, but look at what I gave you. And if you have any questions, you can email me. If there's a lot of questions, I'll be happy to come back next week.
There's two more questions now that I'd like to get to that have come up. One was from Bill Apple. Bill, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, Mylene, I was just asking, to what extent when you're budgeting, do you look to see to the comprehensive plan to determine what you can and cannot spend on and what you will and will not spend on?
Nope.
I would say we never look at the comprehensive plan.
That's what
but you have to understand that the departments are the department's missions and the budgets that they submit are based on their roles in the comprehensive plan. And
loosely,
yeah. But the audit team, no, that is not something that we check again. What we do check against constantly is statutory limitations.
And David, you had a question regarding elected versus appointed in the budget process? David,
yes, when you do the budget process, is there any treatment of a department head's budget if he's elected versus if he's appointed, or is it just exactly the same?
He or she or they.
He or she or they, I'm sorry.
Yes, no, well, okay, the difference in my mind is all of the heads of the administrative departments, I'll call them department heads for purpose of this discussion versus the elected officials, all of them report to Mike. So I am aware that before they submit their budgets to me, they need to put them through Mike, okay? Which does not slow down the process. I'm just aware that he is, a step. He has a role there. Whereas all of the electeds just, they report to the people. So they don't have that extra step.
The other thing is we have seen on several occasions, independently elected officials will come in and defend or testify for their budget before the county council, which a department head would never do unless expressly asked to by their county manager.
Well, at this time, actually, all of the departments are given the opportunity to present to council, both administrative and elected departments. And it's true, they would not come in and argue for something if they knew that Mike was going to disagree with them.
That's,
But
yeah.
they all get the opportunity to talk to council.
And that's been the case for a while. I'm just saying that the electeds have a stronger ability to come in and defend or push for a position because they're independently elected. So we have several other questions here. One, let's see, Tony, go ahead. Tony Gazelle.
Maureen, Mylene, sorry. I saw Maureen.
Okay, Maureen and I are friends.
We
I
are.
saw
We
her name
are.
come up and I thought, sorry about that. Mylene, so how do you determine FTE positions for the elected officials? I know you statutorily you have to fund the elected position, but how about their staff? Who determines the number of FTE?
All of that goes through council. So we have every year, we carry forward the authorized FTEs from the prior year. And if any department, elected or administrative, wants to add a position, they have to take that to council.
So a follow up to that. So if during the budget process, when it comes to the council for debate and a hearing, does the council have the option to say, no, sorry, road department, you have too many FTE. We're going to take a couple out and move them over to name another department. It doesn't matter. So can they do that during the budget process?
Yes, they can, but they would never do that. They would never say, we're taking these two and moving them here. What they might do is say, roads, you're heavy by 2. We're reducing your FTEs. And then they might say, okay, I hear you, Superior Court. You really need 2 more people, so we're going to give them to you. But I really do not believe that those are connected. And I've been doing this a long time. And but yes, they approve every department's FTE, including the elected.
And other expenses as well, right?
And other expenses. And that is the control that the council has over the elected departments, is their budget.
Jane Fuller.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mylene, and thanks for the presentation. I just wanted to mention you skipped over a few slides that would be it would be really interesting to hear you talk to. So maybe we'll yeah, I can envisage that we may need to ask you back to go over a few more details. But thank you very much. A question's arisen as to what difference it would make whether the auditor or the county manager were responsible for creating the budget. Given that the county manager is much more conversant with expenditures of the government, of the local government, of all departments, et cetera, what's your take on that? You know, given that you've got a budget team and obviously you work in close collaboration, you know, what are your thoughts on that being the responsibility of the auditor versus the county manager? Thank you.
Well, the number of factors would go into that. I know you're discussing whether the county manager should be elected or appointed. I think it's important that, first of all, budget's a funny thing. People think it's a lot of power or influence, but mostly it is an administrative task of putting together a lot of pieces into a very difficult puzzle and trying to ensure that everybody has a chance to be heard and ensuring that you have multiple voices going into this final soup. So yes, theoretically that could happen either place. I think the advantage of the auditor's office as county is currently configured is that as an independently elected official, I am an independent voice from the council. And it's good to have independent voices. The county manager is pretty close to the council at this point, and there's a lot of reasons you don't want the council itself putting together the budget. The council is the most political part of a county. And changes the most. you know, if you want history, the council turns over faster than any other department. So, you know, you want stability. And I have to take some exception to saying that the county manager knows more about the expenditures of the government than the auditor, because I can guarantee I know the budget back and forth better than anybody in the county.
Thank you. No offense was intended.
No, I understand that. It made me smile inside. Is that it? You lose Kevin?
Kevin?
Maureen, I know that you have a question.
I have a question and a half, but it's really easy. When a position is budgeted for and in the regular budget, what happens if it's not filled? Does that go into where?
If a position is not filled, typically that is money unspent. Sometimes in departments, in particular ones like community development and planning, if they can't fill some of their planner positions, they may have to contract for those positions. And they would typically, you know, I would say it doesn't take a budget amendment, but get permission to do that from the county manager and, you know, concurrence with their boss on doing something like that. But yes, that is typically a savings and one of the ways that we keep budget below appropriate.
Yeah. The other part of my question is, Mylene, years ago, there used to be in the budget book a very detailed organizational chart that didn't just have it by the lead players and the departments. And it was very interesting to look at because you could see the employees underneath all of the lines. Have we stopped doing that? Is there such a thing?
I don't remember there being one that had the entire county. That would be, you know, it would take a very large piece of paper to do that.
Yeah.
But what we do have in the front of the book, we have a org chart for the county, elected officials, department heads. And under each department, there is an org chart.
Oh, okay.
So you can look for the detail. Now, the departments control what information they provide there. So some provide names and some do not. But
it would just be roles. I'm just looking for the roles so that
there are org charts in every departmental section.
Okay, of the budget book.
Of the budget book. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Looks like we have two other questions. David?
Marlene, yeah, I have a quick question for you, or maybe a little explanation. So the county council with you put out a message saying we want a story told to us about a budget that say cuts 1%, and that message goes out to all the managers and office holders, and then they write that story for you to as a budget to go back to the council to vote on. Is there anybody, I understand that's correct, if that's how it kind of goes, the budget is a story of how our county's going to run?
First of all, that's not what the budget message is. The budget message is a message that goes out with the preliminary budget that is a message to the public. So this is after the preliminary budget has already been put together and says, people, this is what we face. This is what we're trying to accomplish. These are our goals. And sometimes I tend to be long-winded, so they tend to be long with a lot of detail. What you were thinking of is what would be called the budget call. Okay. And that's what goes out in July. That comes just from me, that's statutory, but I always talk to council and to the county manager before sending that out to make sure if we wanted to look for a focus, you know, like there was a year where it was, okay, we're not spending any extra money, so you can ask, but don't expect it to be given. You know, so that is the budget call, and that is the message that goes to the departments in July.
Okay, and one more question. Is there anybody independent of the county or county officials who look at the budget and assess it? Either process or numbers?
No, the state auditor is really more concerned with accounting than with budgeting. And I'm trying to, I've actually, because of my work on the finance committee of the Washington State Auditors Association, have tried to get help from them on presenting about budgets. And they don't really do budgeting. They do accounting. So I think my best answer to that would be no.
Thank you.
Good answer.
The results, of course, in the form of our financial reports are looked at very closely.
Right.
Thank you. We've got one more question from Kyle, and then I think we're going to wrap up this topic.
Thank you, Olivia. Mylene, this is sort of a pie in the sky question, but since you've done this for a while now, where are we not tapping funds for county budgeting and for, where we have quite a few things. I'm sure every group that gets together puts a lot together, but we are talking about new, potentially some new positions, maybe some new small departments. Where can we go? I'd love some thoughts.
Kyle, my somewhat facetious answer to that is I'm in my last term, so I'm retiring in no further away than 2 years from now. And I'm doing that because I've run out of places to tap for more money. When we wanted to get the radio system funded last year, I was the one who found that E911 tax, which is going to work beautifully. We can do it for 5 years, then lower it to a maintenance level. But we are running out of special revenue sources. So unless you look to the state, which we have been doing for years to try to get them to relieve some of the pressure on counties by lifting this ridiculous 1% plus new construction limitation on property tax, that is our best potential long-term sustainable source of funding. As far as special revenue, I know that the Environmental Resources Manager has been trying to find funding for environmental programs that does not rely exclusively on grants, and has been finding that very hard. Working with the ports and other places, she's suggested user fees and all kinds of things. Our best chance, and it would take legislation, is to go to licensing and get a special licensing fine, like those fees they have down in Seattle for various, sound things, to get a fee, maybe just this county, maybe all the sound count, the water counties, that is on licensing of vessels, and have that go into a fee. But then you got to split between counties. It's very difficult to come up with new sources of revenue. Paul, can I say that?
When you were talking about money budgets and that sort of thing, and you're limited on a certain amount of monies, is there any thought about going for lid lift?
Well, we did that last year for the third time since the levy lid lift of 2009. It did pass. At that time, we made it a permanent lift instead of a 6-year lift, so we won't have to go back. You can always go again at some point. The voters may get lid lift fatigue.
So with that, I'm going to thank Mylene and ask you all to help me, and just, Mylene, thank you for taking the time. David, we've got to move on. We've got to get to subcommittees. Mylene, thank you for taking the time, and we may have you back again. And also, if members of the commission have any questions for Mylene, she is extremely responsive. You can call her or email her at the office and ask her questions. And if there's questions from the full commission, send them to her too, and I'm sure she will be responsive to the full commission. So Mylene, thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go into the subcommittee conversation, and I'm going to ask Olivia to share her screen. And what we're going to bring up is the spreadsheet that has the 7 committee members, that one. And so each of you doesn't have to find it. We'll have Olivia share her screen. So there it is. And what I'm hoping that we can go through today is in the short amount of time we have about 20 minutes maybe for this. And Olivia, there it is again. And so what we're hoping is that we can finalize these subcommittees. As I said in an email to the full commission a few days ago, my hope is that, well, first of all, these are suggestions that Olivia and I and Catherine came up with. We need to limit the size of the subcommittees to no more than 7 to make sure that we're within the law and we're not violating the Public Open Meetings Act. And so in doing that, we've made some choices here. If any of you have any concerns or you don't want to be on a committee or you want to be on a committee that you're not, please raise that. This is by no means some, definitive list here. It's just a suggestion. But we tried to put people who had really expressed a lot of interest in different subjects on the committees where they expressed interest. And then we put together some ideas for who could lead those committees. It is my hope that going forward, we will have the subcommittees meeting where needed. Some of these, I believe, will probably be done in 1 or 2 meetings. Others will take several, I'm sure. And so it is my hope that the subcommittees will begin meeting weekly, and then that at our general full commission meetings, we would get updates from those subcommittees in addition to multiple presentations from others who can give us good input like Mylene just did. So with that, my thinking was we would take them one at a time in this list. But I want to see if there's any overarching questions or ideas or thoughts that members have now. And again, if you have your hand up, if you could put it in chat so that we can see it, just so that when the screen is shared, we can't see it all.
I'm having a hard time viewing the chat for this process. So if you can pipe up for changes, etc. This is a working document. I think I see one that needs to make it bigger. It just finally opened.
I would go back to you just sharing the screen, because every time you open something, it covers the screen a little bit.
Yep.
So I can watch the chat. That's fine.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, please, Bob.
I don't know whether my message got to the folks that I was sending it to. Kevin, you were one last night, but I had 2 suggestions. One is that since we are a commission and not a committee, that we stop calling these groups subcommittees and start calling them committees. I think that that's the proper name for them. And also it makes room for us having subcommittees of these committees. And some of them, it may be necessary to tackle certain subjects for us to have a subcommittee that does X, Y, and Z. Okay, that's my first suggestion, that we change to committees. My second suggestion is that we combine 2 of the committees, and I'm talking about operations and elected versus appointed, because of the fact that those deal primarily, they deal with the employees, county employees or subsets of county employees, and also the fact that only 4 people indicated an interest, I think it was, in operations, and 3 of them are already on the elected and appointed list. So we might want to consider doing that. It would be one less meeting for a bunch of people to have to go to.
Okay. So we can discuss that as well. So any other overarching questions before we try and dive in?
This is David. Can I speak?
Yeah, please.
Okay, I have a different take on what Robert just suggested, but I do think there are combinations that can be made to reduce by at least 2 the number of committees. But do we want to get into that detailed discussion now, or do we want to wait till you go down the list? Well, committee by committee.
So the only issue is that we can't have more than 7 people on a committee. Bob, I like your recommendation. Let's just say that by consensus, we're calling these committees now.
Right.
Committees of the commission. So that's fine. But regardless, we can't have more than 7 members. And there were a lot of people interested in different topics. And so we already have 2 committees, both elected versus appointed and climate and environment, where, 10 or 11 members wanted to be in that committee, and we're already having to reduce those. And so if we reduce the total number of committees, maybe it's smart to do so, and we should discuss that now. But that'll mean more people are not on those subcommittees. The other issue that I raised in the email is that if there are topics, for instance, elected versus appointed, where a number of the commissioners want to participate in that discussion, we can, instead of having a committee separately discuss that, we can make that part of our ongoing full commission agenda as well. It's just that it will take more time.
Well, I'm suggesting reducing the load of people also, just like Bob did. But I don't think we should skip for elected versus appointed, for example. I don't think we should skip the subcommittee or the committee format. I think that committee could present a number of very interesting topics or takes for discussion by the full group. But I wouldn't bypass the committee for any one of these topics.
Okay, so let's try and go down this and see if it works. We've now got about 20 minutes.
Kevin,
Yes.
this is Anne Marie. I would like to know why we can't have some of the larger committees just meet as public meetings, because then we don't have to worry about the number of people.
Yeah, we can do that too. And I put that in the email too. Thank you very much for Anne Marie for bringing that up. So if we want, we could have a committee with, any number of people, and we just advertise it as a public meeting. And it's not that complicated. So that's a potential as well.
The one thing to think about for open public meetings is the advertisement cost, and we may need to expand our budget. But
well, they could just be it could be a standing meeting that's every Monday or Tuesday at a certain time, and it's just posted all the time on the website.
Yeah.
That's how we do it for other public meetings that I'm involved in.
Kevin, this is Janet. For some of the larger committees, they have a lot to tackle. What if you split them into just 2 committees and split the duties? So there's 2 elected and appointed A, elected appointed B, and you just split the duties between them.
That's a potential as well.
That everyone could be.
Let's dive into, we'll get back to charter review process nuts and bolts. So for elected and appointed, there's the independently elected officials, the auditor, treasurer, court clerk, so on. And then there's the county manager.
Kevin?
Yes.
I don't know if you notice I've had my hand up here.
No, I did not. So please speak up, because when sharing screen, I can't see people's hand. Or just put in chat, for everybody, just put in chat, I have my hand up, and then I'll call on you.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
I can't see where to do it. It's blocked by the.
If you scroll down on your screen, it should say chat at the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to start a list. So Liz, please go ahead.
My question is just, when was this list updated? Because I don't see the updates that District 3 sent in. I was away getting hooked up for the COVID vaccine, so I'm not seeing, when was this updated, last updated?
This list was sent out to everybody a few days ago, and Jane and I spoke yesterday, and she emailed a list which is not on here, and so she and I just messaged privately, actually, saying that one of you should probably bring that up as well in this discussion. And so what is clear to me already is we're not going to finalize this probably in today's meeting if we're going to end on time. And so why don't we stay on the general high points here? We've got Liz, and then Tony, and then David Dellendorf. Did you have a question as well?
Kevin, before I finish up, so do you want me jumping up and saying, when you're on a group, saying, yes, I did want my name thrown in that?
Yes, and for everybody, most definitely. If there's committees that you want to serve on, I think it's going to be important right now that you raise your voice and say, I want to be on that committee, or we need somebody from Lopez on that committee, if that's the point, if maybe it's not you directly. And this is the time to bring that up. And so what I'm hoping to do is go through some of these. And well, what I was hoping to do is go through all of them and figure out exactly who can be on those so that those committees can start working this week.
Got it.
So,
All right, so we're removing sub. It is now just committee, correct?
even though
Yep.
it sounds weird, but that's
I'm good with that.
okay. So Tony.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to see if I can somehow get back on elected versus appointed. And I don't mind being on the elections residency versus countywide. I think that's a pretty short list of things that we've discussed already, but I'd like to be on the elected versus appointed if somebody is willing to swap places or.
Before we talk about swap, let's see who else wants to be on it, because there's other opportunities. If maybe it becomes a public meeting, or maybe we split it, as Janet said too. So let's go through and gauge the interest. So did I see another hand up?
Yes.
David, and then Bill.
That's not me. So I would suggest, as opposed to what Bill suggested, that the elections be combined with the elected and appointed. I mean, they're obviously connected with each other. So I would combine those two. I think Tony said that the elections would be fairly simple, and that's fine. That's another reason to combine it with something else. But elected versus appointed, and how those elected, any recommendations for elected, how they're going to be voted on, I think it's pertinent to move that elections into elected versus appointed, not what Bob proposed. And I think there's also a chance to combine operations and governance. I'm not really sure the distinction between the two.
Hang on. I'm gonna try and bring this together. Okay, guys?
Thank you.
What I'd like to do is start with the first committee, and we're gonna go down the list, and I want you to tell me if you want to be on that committee or you don't want to be on that committee if you're already on it, or if you're not on it, if you'd like to be on it. And we're gonna see what numbers we have. With the committees where there's a lot of people interested, or maybe we want to combine, then we'll have a better idea. Is that okay if we try and do that?
Yes.
Yes, but also ask if people could volunteer to be removed from the list, not just added.
Yes, that's part of it. But I'd like to just try and dive into this, or we're gonna just not get through any of it. So, charter review process: Bill Apple, Kyle Davies, Jane Fuller, Patty Garcia, Bob O'Connell, Anne Marie Shanks, Tom Starr. Do all of you want to? Does anybody not want to be on that? This is discussing the preamble and going through the kind of nuts and bolts of the charter as it is now.
Kevin, I would like my name to be removed from the preamble. Thank you.
Okay.
Kevin, I could be removed from the preamble also and just submit the language that I would propose.
Okay.
Kevin, you have me down as the leader. I don't mind the idea of being a leader, but I am very kind of electronically challenged. And somebody else would have to set up the Zoom meetings or teach me how to do it, because although I've attended a gazillion Zoom meetings, I've never set one up. So
Bob will teach you.
okay.
Olivia's going to teach you.
Olivia, you're on the committee, are you?
And Kevin, I'm sorry.
Outstanding.
Yes.
No.
I am not on the committee, but I will teach you how to use Zoom.
Okay, thank you,
And
Olivia. I
Liz,
appreciate
question or
that.
comment?
I would like my name added to the preamble.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else want to be on the preamble nuts and bolts charter committee?
So Jane is off, and who else is off?
Anne Marie.
Oh, okay. Boy, we're gonna miss you two. Okay,
I'm going to submit something to you.
Yeah.
I'll submit something in writing.
Next is one of the more popular committees. So we have the elected versus appointed. And I will say this is one that I'm very interested in too. So right now on elected versus appointed, we have David Dillendorf, Paul Dossett, Dick Grout, Bob O'Connell, Olivia Roseberry, and Maureen C. Who else would like to be part of that discussion? Tony, you already said you would.
Yes.
Okay, anybody else?
Kevin, I have an idea.
Bob, just let me see who else is interested in that first.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Is anybody else interested in this committee? I would like to, oh, go ahead.
I will remove myself if Tony would like to be on this committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can you have 7?
Yeah, we can have 7.
Because that was 7.
Yeah. And
Now it's 6, right?
No, it's
No.
now, it's still 7.
Okay, I'm counting wrong.
Actually, you're right. It was 6.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh,
Yeah.
lovely.
anybody else want to be on that committee?
Olivia, you can go back.
Okay. All right. All right. All right.
Kevin had said,
Hey, look, I can't
Kevin
spell
said
my
that
last
he
name.
wanted to get on.
I might revisit that. Let's go down the list. So then next we have elections committee.
Kevin, I wanted to say one more thing about the elections and elected and appointed, if I could have 1 minute. If we took operations and put it up there, because they both have to do with employees, you have Paul and Olivia and Maureen, who are 3 of the 4, are already on elected as far as then turning it around. And Kyle would be 1 additional person. Now, if we got up over 8, this could be the one. This could be the big one that we advertised every week. If we got up over 8, but if we kept it below that, I think we could get that done. And
Bob, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That was operations. And the other thing that happens if we join that together with elected and appointed, I think you knew something about our concern that Lopez have somebody on every committee. That would solve that question, because right now there isn't anybody on operations from Lopez. But if it was connected to elected and appointed, it would work. And then what we would probably want to do is make either the elected and appointed or the operations part of that larger committee, make that a subcommittee that meant to deal with that issue. It's an idea. Toss around.
Can I comment again, please?
Oh, gosh.
Hey, you know,
we're not going to
I
get through this.
I don't see the logic of Bob's argument. I mean, the elected and appointed is going to drive what we propose with regard to elections. It's all part and parcel of the same thing. I don't see where the elections has anything to do with operations. I completely disagree with what Bob has proposed.
We haven't gotten to operations yet. Someone from Lopez may end up going on it if that's the problem. So let's just keep going.
Okay, so elected versus appointed is done for now. Then we have elections, and this is looking at, the residency countywide versus residency, elections observing, which is the issue that was brought up as well. I believe this will be probably a less intensive committee. Right now we have Sharon Abreu, Paul Dossett, Jane Fuller, Tony Gazelle, and Tom Starr. Do any of you want to be removed, or does anybody else want to be on that committee?
Well, if it's going to maintain, it's going to be a separate committee as opposed to combined with elected and appointed, then I think it's logical that I also be on the elections committee, since they're tied together and there's going to be coordination issues.
Great. So put David on there. Bill, I don't have time to read your point. Bill Apple, if that's important, can you raise it now?
Yeah, well, let's see if I'm live. I'm curious. I'm a little concerned about the way this is being divided up, not as to people, but by subcommittees. 2 subcommittees could end up working on the thing that would end up combined in one proposition to the voters. Another subcommittee might end up working on something that has to be split under the single subject rule. I'm a little concerned because we're going to end up with subcommittee products bumping into each other and then have to comb it out. My suggestion was that that Randy be asked which issues can be combined and which issues have to be separated, because otherwise I think we're going to work very inefficiently.
But Bill, we will be consulting Randy throughout this process. However, at this point, we don't know what the specific issues will be that come out of this. So consulting Randy was very clear with me early on. He wanted us to not only have one point person, but be concise in when we're asking him questions. And I think it would be premature at this point because we don't know exactly what's coming out of these.
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to do is put together some groupings that kind of made sense based on our last 2 meetings discussion. And if this doesn't make sense, I'm just going to push back on everybody on this commission right now. You received this 3 days ago. If you had comments for restructuring, that was part of my request. We need it before the meeting. And so if there's full comments or different ideas, please get them to me before the meeting will be really helpful. So there's my vent, sorry.
Thank you, Kevin. No, thank you.
But what I would say now is that we try and go through and just what I wanted to do was see who's interested in what committees, and then we can see if there's an opportunity to bring some of these together or separate them further. But I wanted to gauge the interest and get an idea from each of you if the committees we've put you on are the ones you want to be on, if you care about that subject or not.
I can only assure you, Kevin, that this isn't something I lurked in the bushes with. It only just occurred to me. Whether
I'm sorry, that was not directed at you. It's yeah.
I'm just using this sniff test. That's all.
Yeah, I do think what you're raising is important. What I'd like to do is try and gauge where we each are with these assignments.
Sure.
And then when we're done with that, we can go back and say, okay, does this framework of the committees make sense? And what I'm going to ask right now is that we try and agree, and I hate this, but that we're going to go 15 minutes over on our agenda. No more, though. We will stop at 6:15 because in 5 minutes, we're going to go to public comment regardless. And then that'll take a few minutes, and then we'll come back to this. So where are we? Are we on initiative and referendum? Is that what?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So again, on initiative and referendum, right now, you can see who's on there. It's David and Patty and Dick and Anne Marie. Do others want to be on that?
Kevin, this is Liz Lafferty, and yes, I'd like to be on that committee.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Liz, for stepping up. And what I'm feeling like now, based on this discussion, is that we will do this tonight, and then we will send it out to everybody. And if there's other ideas about combining and such, we can do that. Send those to me, and I'll put together other spreadsheets if this doesn't feel good after we're done with this. So anybody else want off or on to initiative and referendum? Okay. Governance. And this is looking at the county boards and commissions, the budget, transparency, so on. So right now, Dave, Janet, David Dillendorf, Jane, Tony, Dick, Olivia. How many people is that? That's 1, 2.
6.
Yeah, 6. So we could have one more on that. Is anybody interested in that?
1, 2, 3, 4. It's 7.
It is 7.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Yeah, 7.
Okay.
Okay.
That is one I'm actually very interested in because I have revisited in my own mind the issue of how the county charter commission is elected, but I will just speak to a member or two individually and see if you guys care to carry my water. or laugh at me. Okay, so we're good on that one. So then what is this next committee? I'm sorry, you need to scroll over.
Operations.
It is operations, thank you. Kyle, Paul, Maureen, Olivia. And this is dealing with the personnel issues, county procedures, public records, and so on. And Maureen, is that you would like to be on that or you are on it?
I am on it. One comment. This was originally slated to just be slight wording changes in the charter. This is not, for me, on personnel and public records. So FYI.
So we're just trying to combine different subjects that were brought up as the priorities originally.
Yeah.
And so that's why that came together. Again, this could probably be a less intensive committee.
Or it could be done in regular session.
Well, maybe. Does anybody else want to be on that?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to remove myself for sanity.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can we remove ourselves from the Charter Review Commission for sanity? Okay.
No.
So next is another big one, climate and environment.
Sorry,
Oh, I'm sorry, Paul,
Kevin.
please.
I suggest we dissolve that committee. Now go with Bob O'Connell's suggestion.
And where will those subjects be dealt with?
Well, he suggested putting an elected and appointed. I don't know if it'll go there, but
All three of the persons presently that you have presently listed on operations, all of them are already on elected and appointed.
I'd like to object.
So that would work.
You guys, so let's get through the next two committees and then we'll spend a minute on that, okay?
Kevin, can I offer up that temporarily Bob, he didn't react to my chat, but perhaps temporarily Bob could caretake that one as a District 3 rep? I don't know,
Bob, you put your name on that just now?
On operations?
Yeah.
Well, I'm already on elected and appointed. If they come together, I'll be on there, but I don't think I can do more than 3.
Okay, okay, fair enough.
Okay. So right now it's 5:50. I'd like to break, Olivia, we're going to take a pause on this. If you could stop sharing your screen for a moment. And then I want to go to public comment and just see if there's anybody here from the public who would care to comment or laugh at us.
There's plenty of that.
Okay, I see several members of the public here. If you would like to speak, please turn on your video if you can, if you have the bandwidth, and then we can call on you. Alexandra, great to see you. Thank you for being here again.
Thank you. I wanted to speak the amendment that I proposed last week, although I've rewritten it. My primary focus for this amendment is governance.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to state again that for everybody in public comment, we're going to really try and keep people to 2 or 3 minutes each.
Got it.
Thank you.
My name's Alexandra Gayak. My primary focus for this amendment is that the council should serve the people in the county and protect the environment on which we depend. The people worked for a long time to create the vision statement to guide our county to stay the way we want. It should be guiding our entire government. My proposal is to amend section 2.30 under number 2 to delete item D and replace it with item number 4, stating the county council shall ensure through adoption by ordinance and county code, the comprehensive plan and development regulations, and through recruiting, hiring, appointing, and supervising of all county staff and citizen advisory committees and commissions, that the comprehensive plan fulfills the vision statement, and that both be implemented, maintained, and enforced by law and in practice. Conditional use permits and/or other mechanisms shall not be used to evade otherwise applicable county code.
Thank you. Thank you. And you've given that to us in writing as well.
Who should I send it to?
You could send it to Catherine Hansen.
Okay.
Or to myself or Olivia, but Catherine would be the best at this point.
Okay, will do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the public care to comment at this point? Okay, we've scared them off. Okay, so Olivia, if you want to your screen again. So public comment is closed. We're going to go back to the commission discussion of the committees.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Oh, keeps flashing for some reason.
You cannot see the spreadsheet, or at least I cannot see the spreadsheet. I see.
No,
Hmm.
can't see it.
All right, let me try one more time. How about now?
Coming.
There it is.
There it is.
Great. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, now it disappeared.
Yeah, it
Boom.
keeps flashing. That happened last time I started sharing as well. Oh, there's emails.
Okay.
How about that?
See it
Does
now.
that work?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
So another big committee suggestion was, and if folks aren't speaking, if they could mute, that'd be great. Was climate and environment. There was a lot of people interested. We tried to be conscious when we narrowed this down, but again, in a moment, we're going to discuss maybe some of these should just be public meetings or for the full commission. So right now it's Sharon and Bill and Liz and Bob, myself, Anne-Marie Shanks and Tom Starr, with Anne-Marie Shanks acting as a lead on this, just for the conversation now. So are there folks that want to be on this or folks that don't want to be on this?
Well, I want to be on it.
And
I'd like to be on it.
And you're on it. And Bill Apple, you're not on it right now, are you?
Yes, he is.
Oh, yes, you are. Yes, you are. Sorry. Okay. Is there anybody not on it who would like to be?
Yeah, this is Dick. I thought I was on it.
So, yeah, you were one of the ones that got bumped. You were interested in it in the beginning, yes. And so let's put Dick's name now. And I'm not as worried. If they are committees, it's hard not to say subcommittees, subcommissions. If they are separate committees and they go over 7, we're going to have to either have them be public or not. But right now, what I want to do is gauge the interest. So Dick, you'd like to be on that.
Yes, please.
Okay. And
Kevin, I appreciate the task here at hand. I would like to be, but I would, to keep it to 7 if needed, I would bow out.
okay, so let's put you on there as well. And Jane has raised a question. Well, Jane, let's get to the committee leads in just a moment, but I think you raised a good question. We haven't spent as much time discussing the leads for these committees. And so we looked at who we thought would be able to put it in the time, and then also who had expressed a lot of interest in those subjects, and that's how we picked the leads. But that's totally open for discussion as well. So anybody else want to be on the Environment and Climate Committee? Okay. Finally, we have our Justice and Equity Committee.
So
right?
I think before we move on, this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people.
Right. So right now, I'm just trying to figure out who's interested in the committees. And then some of these we're going to have to decide if we go back to 7 people, or we make them a public meeting, or we make it a commission agenda.
Yeah.
But yeah, totally recognize that. And so then the Justice and Equity Committee. So right now that's Sharon and Kyle and Jane and myself. Are there others who would be interested in being on that committee? This will be looking at issues of justice and equity throughout the county within the existing departments, the discussion of creating a citizens oversight committee over law and justice to look at these issues and so on. So anybody else interested in that? Okay, now we can go back. We've got, I need to go back to my agenda here for a second and see what else we're missing. So we were going to talk about the town halls. What I'm going to do is suggest that I'm going to send out an email to each of you with the potential dates or the dates that we discussed and with an idea of content, and you guys can comment back to me individually, and we will finalize that at the next meeting if that's okay. And then we will spend the rest of this agenda finalizing the committees. It's hard not to say subcommittees. Sorry, Bob. But is that okay if we do that for the town halls? Okay, I'm seeing some nodding. Okay, so Olivia, if we go back up to the top of this spreadsheet, if you could minimize it just so we could see it. I know it's harder for folks to see it, but it'd be easy if we could see the whole thing with the names that we have. So right now, there was discussion for elected versus appointed. Do we have 7 people on there or more right now?
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7
Okay.
people.
Does anybody else want to be on elected versus appointed? Okay. What about this idea of combining elected versus appointed with either elections? Operations for me really feels like a different conversation. You're talking about personnel issues and such. I could see a conversation of operations and justice and equity being combined, but we'll get there in a second. What do folks think about elected versus appointed and elections being combined?
To me, they're
different. They're different.
Yeah, they're different.
They're
Yeah.
quite different.
Okay, I agree, but somebody earlier had suggested that. So, okay. So right now,
Would you repeat what you said about combining?
There was I thought I heard a suggestion of combining elections with elected versus appointed. And so
Yes, I feel very strongly. I've said that before. There is a definite connection there that's not with anything else.
okay, there's others saying no. And so, Maureen.
I disagree.
I disagree as well. They do not have complementarity. If you look at the substantive points and the issues raised for those topics, they do not have complementarity. I disagree.
I disagree. The only thing that's the same is the word elect in each one of them.
Okay, so let's keep those separate. So right now we have 7 on elected versus appointed. And let's see, is there, and so that I'm just making sure we're good there. Let me see. David, disappointed. Okay, good. So do we want to say that that's the committee? The issue is if we let this move forward with 7 and you want to be engaged in that conversation, we're going to run up against the Open Public Meetings Act. And so what we want to do is make sure we're not doing that, so we don't have Randy, scolding us, or more importantly, we break the law. And so I just want to be clear. So we're good on this, and it would move forward as I'm just going to say subcommittee.
Is it a subcommittee? Of
Committee.
what committee?
Bob, don't get caught up in semantics with me. I just said subcommittee just because it flows better for me. All right.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kevin. I thought you.
It's all right. It's a committee. It's a committee. But so folks,
Yeah, I see.
we're going to close that. So
One question about that.
yeah, Patty.
Can we talk to one of those individuals if we just wanted to ask a question or have a conversation with one person, and it'd be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. What's not okay is you talking to several people on the committee at once. But if you wanted to have a conversation with one person, that's fine. The other thing is, my hope is, what I'd like to suggest is that these subcommittees, maybe not every week, but regularly report back to the full commission during their discussions, so that the full commission can weigh in before they come to conclusions.
That's a good idea.
So for instance, on elected versus appointed, I have a lot of interest in this subject, but I want other people to be able to participate. And so I plan on talking to, 1 or 2 individuals, but then I hope that this committee will be coming back and reporting to us. And then we will dedicate, a half an hour or 40 minutes discussion to it. So,
Kevin, can people who are not on the committee, commissioners who are not on the committee, attend the meeting as members of the public?
I don't believe so, but Randy can clarify that. Even if you don't comment, I think it would still, if you're in the room, you're technically participating.
Okay.
So,
If we could get some clarification on that, because that would really change the dynamics if you could go listen.
Yeah,
to what's going on.
let's say no, and if I'm wrong, Randy can tell us, but I think. right now-
I strongly discourage it
Thank
for
you.
the reasons that Kevin has said, and it's the
Okay.
possibility of being present and giving a head nod if that group makes a motion and creating a negative quorum. It's the possibility of putting pressure on people. They're going to come to the group as a whole. And when you meet as a whole, that's where decisions are to be made.
Thank you, Randy.
So Kevin, on that subject, by having 7, and this is following up on those 2 comments that I agree with. If we have 7 and there's a subcommittee and a meeting and it says, it'd be helpful to have Kevin sit in as our chair, and he was ex-council member, it'd be helpful to have him come and answer a couple of questions. Then it changes the dynamic, as Randy and Bob, I think, said. So I'm wondering, and that's inevitably going to happen because you are the chair. So would it make sense to limit these subcommittees to 6 so that we don't run that risk at all?
We have too many members interested in too many subjects. And so what I was suggesting is that for exactly that reason, if that were the case, if you wanted to hear from me as a past commissioner and council member for the county, we would have that in a full commission meeting. So whoever the lead is, so Maureen C would come to me and say, hey, a bunch of Kevin questions have come up for you, Kevin. And then we'd schedule that on the next agenda for the full CRC. Yeah. And so then it's not a big deal. And so that's the way I'm thinking about it right now. If others have suggestions, we want to revisit that. If the other thing is, if we start going in a few weeks from now, this process doesn't seem to be working, we can come back and revisit some of this. But I'd like to try and get us moving with these subcommittees so that that work can begin. So right now we've got, I'm going to back up, charter review process. I think that's closed. That's good. Everybody's okay with that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so the next one is election versus appointed. We've had a lot of discussion. Seems like we're good. We've got the membership right at 7. Everybody good?
Yes.
Okay.
I am going to bow out of this one thinking about time. So sorry for the late change, but I'm going to remove myself from this one. And I will submit my suggestions to you, Maureen.
Okay. Was there somebody else who wants to add now that there's room for one?
We'll put you on there, Kevin.
I can wait for now. I'm also worried about my time. I'm spending a lot of time behind the scenes on stuff, a lot more than I thought.
Yeah.
I do like the idea though of that one being one less, so that, maybe I could sit in on a meeting or another member could. But we want to think about that as far as the law as well. So let's go down to the next one, elections, which we are going to keep. There was enough people saying they wanted this to be a separate discussion. Everybody okay with that membership for the elections committee?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Excellent. Initiative versus referendum. I can't even talk anymore. And I'm sorry. Let me back up again. I wanted to go back to Jane's point, which is a really important one. If you could go back to the top really quickly, excuse me. So Bob O'Connell for the lead on the first one. Bob, you're okay with being the lead because Olivia is going to teach you Zoom, and other folks are okay with that? Okay, and then Maureen C on elections versus appointed.
Yes.
Excellent. And we have Tony on elections.
Okay.
Tony, you're okay with that?
Yep. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, now on initiative versus referendum, we're okay with the membership there? Okay, and Dick as the lead on that. Dick, you're okay with that?
I am.
Thank you very much for stepping up. Okay, on the next one, governance, we're okay with the membership we have here. And with Dave Anderson, Dave, you're willing to be the lead? Does anybody else want to be the lead? That's the other question. If somebody else really wants to be the lead, we kind of assigned these, so don't think people are wedded to being the lead necessarily. So if anybody else wants to be a lead on any of these committees, let me know that as well. But right now we have Dave Anderson. So Dave, are you willing to do that? And is anybody else interested?
It'd be great if nobody else wants to.
I just have a question on leads, and the role of the lead. I mean, we haven't defined that at all, and so I think it's if you put your hand up for something, it'd be helpful to know what that implies.
Thank you, Jane. It's a secret and we're not telling you. I'm sorry. Someone told me a long time ago, sometimes my humor is not very funny, so you guys can tell me if it's not. Yeah. So what I was thinking for the leads is simply that you're the one scheduling the meetings, you're setting up the Zoom calls, you are you're chairing the meeting kind of in a loose format. These are smaller groups, but that you would act as the chair or the lead for that subcommittee, that committee. And so you would help. I would hope that the agenda would be a really conclusive process, an inclusive process as well. And starting to go through these. But what we wanted to do is point to one person to say it's your responsibility to schedule the meetings is the big piece.
Is it also the person that would be presenting to the commission their findings?
I think that could be loose. They'd probably lead that.
Yeah.
But that would be the full commission coming back, or the full committee coming back and saying, you know, we want to have a discussion with the full commission now.
Yeah, so Kevin, that's helpful, and thank you. You know, some folks are more familiar with others and how to chair meetings and how to conduct themselves, etc. So I think it'd just be, you know, if there are any things that arise, it would be, and I'm not saying that anything is going to arise in any of these, but it's just, you know, it's just good to know that perhaps a lead could refer back to you if there's challenges, or, you know what I mean? Like, just, I mean, anyway.
Yeah, no. So on that note, I would say that I am happy to play that role, and not just for a lead, but if any member of a committee, Bob, I'm sorry, I'm going to call them subcommittees. It just doesn't work in my head, because whether we're a commissioner committee, we're the lead, and then there's smaller ones, those are subcommittees in my head. So if anybody on any subcommittee has an issue, please come back to me. And if you're not comfortable talking to me, you can talk to Olivia or anybody else, you know, but please come back to me and just say, you know, hey, this is coming up. We'd like some guidance, or maybe I have a concern, whatever, because we want to be able to make sure we deal with all of those issues. Okay. All right. So on governance, we have Dave as the lead and we have those members. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. On operations, we have, it's a 3-member committee.
Yes.
And everybody's okay with that. Nobody else wants to be on that. It's going to be exciting. Paul's a partier.
Right. I'm really a part of you.
That's a high quality group.
Olivia, I'm going to bow to Olivia because she had suggested this. There be some changes to the charter, and I don't know. I suggested we dissolve it to begin with, but I bow to Maureen. Maureen?
Yes, I'm here, and I heard you. This is pretty direct, so let's just see how this goes. Let's start it and then see.
This was. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What is this committee? I can't see it on there.
It's
okay. So
looking at personnel matters, procedures, public records, basic operations, and Paul, to your point, this was one of the committees where, as opposed to dissolving it, I thought that because there was some specific discussion that needed to happen, that this subcommittee could have that discussion and maybe only meet once, maybe twice, and then come back with recommendations early on. This is just because it's a subcommittee doesn't mean it's going to go through till June or something.
Right.
Okay.
I could be on this one.
Okay.
If you needed more, but I'm not from Lopez.
No.
I have to move.
Let's put Patty on operations. Does anybody from Lopez want to jump on operations?
As things stand now, I think, you know, we're all, our dancing cards are all full, and you know, we're just going to come harass Patty if there's any issues. And no, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, this one really does feel like housekeeping to me, and
yeah.
Just so everybody knows, you know, because I want to be completely transparent. I've already shared this with Kevin and Olivia and also Catherine. I mean, the 3 commissioners from District 3 did talk about a divvying up, simply because we're only 3, And we just want to make sure that we can all follow the issues, to be, you know, aware of how the subcommittees are working on things. So just to be fully transparent to you all, it's just a matter of just making sure that we're sitting at the table too, and we can, you know, be able to talk to our constituents about issues being discussed, et cetera. So that's all I want to share. Thank you.
And Kevin, this is Liz. I would add to that, that my request would be if the committee finds it getting to be more than housekeeping and our, you know, constituents would need to be better represented, you know, let me know and, you know, we'll figure out who can step up. And
Excellent. Thank you. The other thing I was just going to say is this committee has a small enough membership that if you wanted to sit in on a meeting or two, you could do so.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I would just appreciate a heads up from the committee if they feel like, you know, we're really getting into nuts and bolts here that need to be represented, you know, clearly across the county. And then one of us will step in and be there consistently.
Awesome.
Right, guys?
Right.
I love how
Right, Liz.
Lopez is so organized. Orcas, I wave to people on the street and that's
Yeah.
it.
We're
Okay.
going to start wearing uniforms.
Climate
so
and
we look like-
environment. Climate and environment. We've got the membership. Anne-Marie Shanks is the lead. Right now will be a separate subcommittee with 7 members. Folks okay with that?
How many?
Honestly, I think that
Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry.
we
This
should
is
have this be something
9.
that the full
Yeah, sorry,
commission.
the one where
You
we
have
had
9.
so I'm sorry. So with climate and environment, do we want to go ahead and make this a public meeting?
The other
If you-
option is to make this a full discussion for the commission. I mean, more than half of, you know, the commissioners are interested. You know, the only reason why I bowed out of this is because there was, you know, so many people with great experience around climate, and I feel passionate about this as well. But I bowed out so other people could participate. So that is something to consider, is having this be an actual discussion for the full commission.
So
This is Liz. I have a question about process.
Yeah, go ahead, Liz.
Is it possible to do both, to go ahead and establish a committee and then have us report, have a block on the agenda regularly, so we're reporting, you know, like a little more time, a little more consistently than some of the other committees?
Yes, Liz, to respond to that specifically, you could also, if it's a public meeting, other members of the commission could join in.
There's another kind of out there thing we could do if we had nine folks who were interested in doing it and we had a weekly meeting. We could have a schedule where only 7 people showed up each time. It's not how many people are on the committee. I
Bob,
don't think.
that would get into the chain discussions and be a violation of the Public Open Meetings Act.
Oh, because some people
I have
were there one meeting and.
One more thing to add about this one. If it were open to the whole thing, it would take up our whole meeting. I think it's something that needs to be discussed in subcommittee and come back there, because it just would take up everybody. We're all interested.
Make it a public meeting then.
Guys,
Yeah.
we're over, which is a rule I don't usually break. And so what I would like to suggest is, let me say, for justice and equity, we're all good with that, right? Everybody's
Yes.
Okay, yes, that one's good. So climate and environment, what I'm going to suggest is all of the members listed there. Tony, I'll get to you one second. All the members listed there are on the committee, and we're going to make it public meetings and we're going to advertise it. And we'll see how that goes forward. Tony, I'm sorry if my suggestion was something that cut you off. Please go ahead.
I just wanted to see if we can summarize what we've covered so far, in a sense that what the process is going to be for these subcommittees. So we're going to be, the leads will be kind of conducting the meeting. We will be using Robert's rule, the modified Robert's rule.
Right.
And if we need an 8th or a 9th position, or I mean, if we have questions for the chair, we'll just bring them to the regular meeting. We don't call on the chair. I mean, you as the chair, not the committee lead. We will bring the questions to the public meeting when we are meeting again. We'll get away from having more people in the committee meetings, subcommittee meetings.
That's right. So go ahead.
And then finally, it's something that we can call on other members of the staff of the county to come into those meetings if we have to. Is that authorized?
No, if the subcommittee has 7 members, you
No.
can have another member of the commission. If it's a
That's-
smaller, like 4 or 5, you could have one person come on, but you could not have different people coming on staggering, because that would get into the violation.
Kevin, I do understand that part. I'm asking, can we ask members of the county to, employees of the county, elected or not elected, to come to the subcommittee to answer questions if we need to?
Yes, absolutely. My only thing would be that you please talk to me first, so that we're not double asking the same person to come to the full commission versus subcommittee.
Granted. And based on my question from last time, is somebody going to help us with minute taking?
You're going to have to figure that out right now, because we are already maxed out on time, but hopefully next week, I'm going to be reaching out to the county council. I'm seeing if I can get time on their agenda next week for the budget request that you authorized, the full commission authorized me to ask for last week. So hopefully next week we'll have that discussion with the council, and we may be able to get some additional support. But at this point, I would say that for the subcommittees, you're going to have to designate somebody to take notes on your own, because we don't have more time of Catherine.
Kevin, I'm willing to step back.
If that becomes problematic, we can revisit that.
No, thank you so much. We can always record the meeting ourselves, so that's not a problem.
Bill?
Kevin, I'm willing to step back from the environmental subcommittee, because I think it's important that it work efficiently to start. We're all going to have a crack at whatever the subcommittee comes up with. So I'm comfortable not being on it if it helps the process and simplifies our lives.
Okay. I think you being on it is, I think your voice is actually pretty important on that one. And I think let's see how this goes as a public meeting. And if it's too costly or too problematic, we can revisit it. But I think we've got a good suggestion here. And so with that, I don't think we need a motion. We've all, through consensus, agreed that these will be our subcommittees. But you know what, actually, why I would accept a motion just to say that the subcommittees, as we've discussed now, that we want to adopt as our committees going forward. If somebody would put that on, just so we formalize.
I would make a motion that we adopt the subcommittees as we've discussed today.
Okay.
I second.
Okay.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Any abstentions?
I was getting there. Any abstentions? Okay, so the motion carries. These are our subcommittees or committees, well, whatever. The final thing I want to say, or I'm sorry, Maureen, did you have a question?
Are we free to start thinking about meeting times?
Yes, I would
Okay.
encourage the leads to send an email to your committee and say
Okay.
that you would like to schedule a meeting, and here's some my suggested times.
Got it. Thank you.
If you need help, reach out to me or to Catherine, but we really hope that you as leads can take that on.
Yep.
The last
So,
thing,
on that same topic, Kevin, can I interject real quick? This is Olivia. For these subcommittee leads, I know that I had briefly talked to Kevin and to Catherine about this. Catherine is on overload. If you have questions related to Zoom, how to get into the Zoom link, no leaders, I will be getting you the login information for this account to utilize. We just need to make sure that we're not utilizing it at the same time.
Yeah.
And just understand that I'll be your point of contact there, because we're trying to take some weight off of Catherine, because we still have not got our second round for the budget increase approved. So put more on me and less on her, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia.
And Jane, yes, you can use your own Zoom account if you have one. And yes, we will send this final spreadsheet. We will share it with everybody, Kyle. So I want to thank everybody for going through this long meeting this evening. And unfortunately, what I'm going to request is that going forward, until we don't need it, I want to bump our meetings to 2.5 hours. So they would go from 4 to 6:30 on Wednesdays. And so what I'm going to do is suggest that now and not ask for comments now. But if you have comments or concerns, just call me or email me, And we will finalize that decision before we send out the next agenda on Monday early. But tentatively, what I'm thinking is we go half an hour over so that we make sure that we have time for discussions and people can plan for it instead of it just happening. And I deeply apologize for us going over this evening. I don't like that. But I am glad that we got through the subcommittees. So any other final comments?
Mr. Chair, would you entertain a motion to make that change?
Yeah.
Extend the meeting time?
Yeah.
So moved. I move we extend the weekly meeting time to 2.5 hours from 4 to 6:30.
I seconded it.
Okay, second by Jane or Liz. Let's say Liz gets the second. Okay, any discussion?
Move the question.
All right, question.
I have,
Oh, Jane, sorry. We'll let Jane go.
I was just going to say, guys, I think out of respect for our chair and the challenging meetings he's had thus far, I think we really all need to be on top of our emails regularly for our work here. I mean, I'm sure many are, but we got to do our homework before these meetings and just be on top of the issues. So because Kevin, you've done a great job. It's been darn challenging, and thank you very much for everything.
Thank you.
And the only other thing I would say about extending the time is that this not then add on another half hour. I mean, that people really start limiting their comment, so it's not this sliding scale of we're now from 4 to 9 o'clock at night because we're adding on another half hour every time.
Yeah. Janet, on that point, so I'm going to start being a little stricter on comments. And so in our own rules, if you've already spoken, you don't speak again until everybody else has commented. And we really try and have people only comment once. And if you really have to comment a second time, and then also, several of you commented to me that last time we had some people in the public comment taking a lot of time. I would say that we're just as guilty, if not more guilty of that. And so I'm going to start being a little stricter as chair. And it's not that I don't love you all. It's that I really don't feel good when we go over on an agenda time. And so Janet, to your point, we will be stopping precisely at 6:30, and we will not go a minute over regardless of where we are on the agenda. It'll be the same way we treat public comment. Public comment will happen at, now it'll be in the last 10 minutes and then that'll be it. So with that, I do want to thank you all. I'm still really enjoying this, even though I may have an aneurysm.
No, don't.
So yeah, and Bill,
joke about it.
And Bill, I wrote this to you in the chat too, but I'm sorry I vented right after your comment. That was not directed at you. I just needed to move us on.
As I emailed back to you, we have a lot in common.
Right on. Okay, listen, everybody have a wonderful evening. Leads on committee.
I think Bill called for the vote and we didn't do it.
Yeah, that's right. So, did we not call the question?
Yeah, because we went over to Jane, so we didn't.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, so all in favor of extending by half an hour to 6:30? Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Okay, great. Motion carries. I would accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you.
Randy, can you stay on for a sec?
And Kevin, I have a quick comment for you. May I stay?
Hold on. We
Yeah,
need
please.
to stop recording first. 1 second.
I have a quick thing to say to Kevin also.
Okay, Randy, are you
Hold
still?
on. We need to stop recording. Hey, Catherine, can you stop recording? I'm not able to do that.
Thanks, Randy. Randy, do you mind just staying on for just a couple minutes? I just had a question for you.
Yes, wait till the recording ends.
Yeah, of course.
Can we stay on if we want to?
Yeah, I'd like to just have a back and forth with Randy for a second though too. So, but if others,
Bye-bye. I'm done.
Okay. Bye, Maureen. Thank you.
You got it.
Did others have questions?
Kevin, I had one short thing. Should I go now or wait?
Just please wait 1 second. Hold on.
Right.
We need to wait. Catherine's computer was having issues and she's the one that's recording. So how about we all hop off, and then if you need to talk to Kevin, hop back on. I think that's the only way to really end this, because her computer is on hold. So
yes,
Great idea. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, Liz, can you just hop back on? So we just do it that
Okay.
way? Yeah.
Okay.
So.
All right.
Randy.
Bye, everybody. Have you been able to disconnect your
It's still recording.
Yeah. I don't think Catherine can hear me. Let me see if I can call her to see if she can shut her computer off, because I know that she had to, something happened with
Catherine,
her
are you there?
computer and she hopped on to her iPad.
Yeah, I just shut my computer down.
Will you check and see if Randy's in the waiting room too? So I don't get scolded again.
He's not yet.
Okay. Okay, if this is still recording, Liz, I want to make sure I've got your number. We can just do it that way.
We can't delete the recording? Is that like a criminal offense?
No, I just wanted to talk to Randy though, and I'd rather not have that recorded. And
Oh,
it's
got
nothing crazy. It's just, I just want to talk to, there, did it stop recording? Nope.
Recording.
Hmm.
That's too bad.
I'm going to log into the Zoom account on the back end to see if I can shut it off.
Oh, thank you,
Liz,
Olivia.
what was your question?
It's almost more of a personal comment that I just wanted to, you want me to go for it, or doesn't matter to me if it's recorded?
No, it's okay. As long as you're not going to beat me up, because I don't want to cry on camera.
So there is so much that I respect and am blown away with how you manage these meetings and facilitate. It's really a real pleasure to, see this coming together the way it is. My comment had to do with all of us are going to have to learn to use new language. So I was plugging for you to handle that request from Bob. I don't care what we call it, but more like saying, I just can't think that way. Because I do think we all are going to have to step up and step into new language is required, new thinking is required. So that was all I wanted to say. And I hope it doesn't feel like beating you up at all, because I am blown away with how you're moving us forward. So did that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And for me, it's just, I think of them as subcommittees, and saying subcommission just sounds weird. So
and I can hear the whole thing is people saying, but I think of her as a she. I think of him as a, and we all have to just, God,
on that, and there was one point this evening where I actually did raise that.
Yeah, no, I did.
Said
I did.
And so for me, I'm going to be a stickler on that, because I think